it's CricketSong, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the topic of cultural appropriation within the Pagan / Wiccan community. This was requested by an individual, I don't remember who, but it was in a comment to one of my other videos. They asked if I would share my thoughts on the topic, and it was specifically, the question was, what are your views on cultural appropriation in the Pagan / Wiccan community? Now, they didn't specifically say in regards to witchcraft, but just Pagan / Wiccan. And I may include witchcraft community too. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you I don't have any set opinions regarding it, but I'll share with you my thoughts. So I want to start out by discussing the definition of cultural appropriation and how I understand the definition, what it means when we talk about cultural appropriation. So culture is anything associated with a group of people based on their ethnicity, religion, geography, or social environment. And appropriation means taking something that doesn't belong to you. Usually this exchange occurs when a dominant group takes something from a minority group that has historically been exploited or oppressed. So then, as I understand it, cultural appropriation would be taking something that doesn't belong to you from another group of people that are not tied to you by ethnicity, religion, geography, or social environment, and especially if you are a part of a group with privilege that are taking something that belongs to a minority or a historically exploited or oppressed people. So I need to acknowledge here that I am looking at this definition and these situations from a place of privilege. I mean, I am a white female, woman, so I definitely come from a place of privilege, and I was brought up in a privileged household. So my perspective is from that point of view. And I would imagine that my opinions may be different if I was a member of a minority group, if I was a person of color or any other group. My thoughts and opinions may be different. And I am open to anybody watching this video that feels I need to be corrected, because my opinions about cultural appropriation are not fixed, and I am open to changing my thoughts and opinions. So with that said, I think I would be naive to believe that cultural appropriation within the Wiccan / Pagan community doesn't occur. I'd be naive to think that that was a truth. So clearly it occurs within this community. Am I guilty of doing this? I don't know. I don't believe I am, but I could be wrong. I could be totally ignorant to think that I'm without fault in regards to cultural appropriation. I think there is a difference between cultural appropriation and sharing things amongst people. I mean, I live in the United States, and my personal heritage is a mixture of different cultures, French, Scottish, there's Polish in my family. So I'm coming from a mixture of, European ancestry, but living in America, we're exposed to a lot of different cultures. My second husband was Puerto Rican. So I was exposed to his culture, which was somewhat different from my own. My children are even more mixed cultures and mixed heritage than my own. So I understand and I can see, at least within my own paganism and my own beliefs and my own practices, that it's very eclectic. If and when I do adopt other practices, spiritual practices, or religious practices from a culture that I'm not familiar with, I do the research on where this came from and why I adopt it into my practice. For me personally, I don't adopt things just because I think they're cool. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but generally, because I am a very spiritual person and have always been a very spiritual person, regardless of what religion or spirituality I have been practicing and following, I am very much connected to everything and anything I do within my own practice, more than it's just cool. You know, I have a deeper meaning for everything that I do. And when it no longer aligns with my own practices or my own beliefs or my own feelings, then I no longer follow that. So I would hope in that sense that these practices, I'm guilty of cultural appropriation. Because when I look at it, if I adopt it, if I take something that doesn't belong to my own culture or my own ethnicity or my own religion, then I'm doing so not to exploit it, but to practice it with this sacredness. Now, I understand that if it doesn't come from my own ethnicity or my own culture, I may not have the full comprehensive understanding of what it is because I was not brought up with that. It hasn't been part of my history, but I try to do the best I can to understand it. But again, because there's going to be a disconnect. I recognize there's going to be a disconnect. I believe, and I feel, and I think that the examples of cultural appropriation is when someone takes something that doesn't belong to them and exploits it, you know, in some way. They're using it to gain something more than, you know, spiritual enlightenment or connection with spirits. That I believe it's something like money or power, something in that way, or to belittle where it came from. I think when we're looking at examples of this, there is, what's the motivation behind it? Those other types of motivations may not be culturally appropriating something. And this is why my thoughts are not solidified and why I'm open to understanding it more. I think there's a lot of practices within paganism and even Wicca, which is eclectic anyway, that there are cross practices between different cultures, that we can do research and find that, you know, this culture over here reveres the sun. Oh, this culture over here reveres the sun as well. And they do it this way, and this culture does it this way, and there's a lot of similarities. So I sometimes feel that there are practices that one person may think the other person is appropriating, but actually when you go through and look at it, it's not, because it's very similar in each spiritual practice or each culture. I also think that it's very difficult for, at least me personally, to look at someone else's pagan practice and point the finger and say that they're guilty of cultural appropriation. Because number one, I know from personal experience that it's dangerous to judge someone by how they look. It's hard to determine a person's culture just by the way that they present. You can look at my own children and think that they come from a different culture than they do. So for me to look at someone and suggest that what their practice is, they are guilty of cultural appropriation because they don't typically look like someone who comes from that particular culture, could be very inaccurate. So I am uncomfortable, for me personally, pointing fingers and calling people out. Number one, because I do come from a place of privilege. And number two, because I cannot judge who is guilty of cultural appropriation and who is not. So that's a difficulty there as well. So I guess I know my overall take and my overall thoughts on cultural appropriation within the Pagan/Wiccan community is that it happens, but I'm not the person to police who is guilty of it and who isn't. I just try to do my best not to be guilty of that. And if I do adopt something from another culture into my own personal practice, then I do my best to do so with respect and understanding. And, I do the research as to what this is and how it was practiced. I'm not looking to be a reconstructionist of any religion. I think that's different. But I want to have a deep spiritual connection with any practice and within my own pagan practice. And I can't really speak to other people's practices. I just can't. I'm not them. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know if this really gave that individual what they were looking for in regards to my thoughts on cultural appropriation. And I'm open to any other thoughts, or I'd love to have a discussion on this. So please leave your comments in the comments section down below. I read them all. That's what I have to say in regards to the topic. Until next time, I love you. Blessed be.